part 1 of celebrating Whitney Houston, I dove deep into her childhood, the start of her career, and left off at the 1989 Soul Train Music Awards, where Whitney met Bobby Brown. Be aware, I do deep dives. I really try to immerse you in Whitney's life. Oh my god, I'm still wearing my sunglasses. I just got back in the house, so yeah, let me fix that. As I was saying, I really am trying to fully immerse you in Whitney's life. So this isn't just a meat and potatoes video. I'm giving you the sides, I'm giving you dessert, I'm giving you leftovers in a to-go box.
Got beans, greens, potatoes, tomatoes, lamb, ram, beans, greens, potatoes, tomatoes, chicken, turkeys, rat.
If you're into that, I highly recommend watching the first part before this one. Whitney's early life and the beginning of her career, I think personally, is crucial. And it's really fascinating, so yeah, definitely check out part 1. Despite all her success, she was yet again booed at the Soul Train Awards, but this did not shake Whitney's confidence. She saw a gorgeous young man who had insane talent. He could sing, he could dance, his stage presence drove the crowd wild. And of course, this young man was Bobby Brown. Bobby was definitely a ladies' man. He was linked to Madonna and Janet Jackson. He could have any woman he wanted, and he knew it. Bobby admitted himself that he was very cocky at this time, and it's not hard to see why. But this is not celebrating Bobby Brown, so I'll keep this brief, but Bobby's success is relevant in my opinion when it comes to his and Whitney's relationship. I'm going to rewind all the way back to the group that was my introduction to Bobby Brown, New Edition. Bobby was only 12 when he and friends Michael Bivins, Ricky Bell, and Ralph Tresvant founded the group New Edition. They performed at talent shows around Boston and eventually signed with Streetwise Records. Not long after that, they put out their debut album, Candy Girl. The title track, which Bobby sang co-lead, was a top 20 hit on the Billboard R&B singles chart in 1983. After they released Candy Girl, they did not stop. The momentum was hot. They had hits like Mr. Telephone Man and Cool It Now. There was some financial drama, which typical with record labels, and especially with young, naive artists, they definitely take advantage of them. But there was also some alleged jealousy on Bobby's behalf. That's what the other New Edition members were saying. Bobby really liked to be the center of attention, so he would step out of a position or do something that would draw attention to himself on stage just to, be the star. And this is really where we see Bobby develop that sort of seductive performance style. In my opinion, I think this was him reaching for some attention that he felt was lacking, but the group and their management did not appreciate this. There's mixed answers about the how and why Bobby departed New Edition, but 1986 was the year he became a solo act. It took a minute, but his second solo album, Don't Be Cruel, that released in 1988, was the most successful of his career. It had 5 top 10 hits on Billboard, including the #1 single that Bobby wrote himself, My Prerogative. He topped both the pop and R&B charts. And by the time he met Whitney Houston, his album sales reached 12 million worldwide. Whitney was actually the one to pursue Bobby at the Soul Train Music Awards. She was like nudging him in his back and accidentally, bumping his head. And she did this a few times until she got Bobby's attention that she was dying for. She was playing a little hard to get after, basically punching this man in the head several times. No judgment, can relate. Bobby was extremely annoyed. He finally got to the point where he tapped her and was like, you keep hitting me, right? And Whitney sort of turned around all cute and was just like, I know. I wonder if her Venus is in Aries, because this is sounding eerily similar. Astrology check. From the outside looking in at that time, Whitney and Bobby could not have been a stranger pairing. Whitney was America's sweetheart, and as I mentioned in part 1, her whole image was crafted to be the good Christian girl plucked from the suburbs. Bobby is from Roxbury, okay? Roxbury, Massachusetts, and I am a fellow masshole, so I am pretty familiar with Roxbury, and it's a little rough around the edges. Ironically, so is Newark, where Whitney was raised, but we're not talking about facts, we're talking about the optics of everything. Bobby was more than proud to represent where he came from. He was also hypersexual and unrefined. He was the bad boy, and Whitney, to the public, was extremely sophisticated. So sophisticated, some people found her unrelatable. The truth is, Whitney was a 20-something who grew up 20 minutes outside of Newark. She was not a naive, innocent little princess like the media portrayed. She had grit, and she really loved Bobby. It was also said by Whitney's close friends that Bobby was just like Whitney's brothers. He was not a foreign personality to Whitney. Also, please know when I say, oh, she wasn't a princess, blah, 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 I don't mean that in any type of negative way. Actually, it's quite the opposite. Whitney found that Bobby brought out her goofy, playful side. She could be herself with him. In Bobby Brown's book, Every Little Step, which I have a few issues with that book, many issues with that book, but he said that after the whole nudging incident in the audience, he had his performance, and during, he took his jacket off. Whitney allegedly told her friend to go get that jacket, so when Bobby went looking for it, Miss Whitney would have it in her possession. Bobby then shares that Whitney cutely and shyly asked to keep the jacket, which he agreed to. They shared their numbers with each other, and Bobby reached out about a week later and asked her on a date. And this is the start of the whirlwind. They trotted around the globe together. It was very passionate, very fairy tale-like, only for a brief period. As I mentioned earlier, Bobby himself said that he was extremely cocky at this time. He mentioned this in his book. He was sort of in his hot boy era, but yes, this book was so wild, I just need to share. There was a few quotes that were kind of cringe, but there was one where he was like, I was the hot guy in the room, I zipped through in a hurry. That is short, but illuminating. Do I think this tell-all book was shady and unproductive in a lot of ways? Yeah, I believe that. And you may be wondering, why am I sharing this if I'm not trying to, slander him? It's simply because I want to give you a sense of his personality at this time. Bobby also said in this book that at first he was like, Whitney is just not my type. Janet Jackson, she's my type. And then he went and he thirsted after Janet Jackson. I believe they even dated. Janet was his example of what he physically wanted in a woman. Bobby is what I will call an unreliable narrator. His stories are inconsistent at best, but benefit of the doubt, he may have a really bad memory. A lot of this happened a long time ago. I can relate. I don't remember what I had for breakfast, so I'm in the same boat, if that's the case, but who knows. More recently, he's come out and said, oh, it was love at first sight. I saw her and I melted inside. So was he feeling her immediately? I don't know, maybe internally, but externally, physically, he's like, not my type. Whitney was beautiful. She was like 5'8", 5'9", and very slender, and Bobby said he was more into, the shorter, thicker girls. He wanted the LA face and the Oakland booty. Another thing Bobby said was that he realized Whitney was the one for him. Those love bells went jingling in his head when he saw that Whitney smoked Newports. And he's like, oh my God, she smokes. I can't even tell Janet I smoke. She doesn't even know I smoke. And here she is sparking up a Newport, the Rolls Royce of cigarettes. I think that's, what my parents made it seem like when I was growing up. But getting back to this seemingly odd statement, I think it makes a lot of sense, even though it sounds kind of funny. I think Bobby, a lot like Whitney, realized he could be himself around her. Even with his flaws and, his smoking, he could be open with her. After he realized what a catch Whitney was, he started to think, wow, this is, an American goddess, America's sweetheart. He knew that he could not pursue her like he pursued other women for things that maybe weren't as serious as a committed relationship. He knew he really had to put in a lot of effort for this one. We will circle back to Bobby when and where it's relevant, but Miss Whitney Houston had much bigger things going on than Bobby Brown. In the summer of 1989, Whitney was nominated for a Nickelodeon Kids' Choice Award for Favorite Female Singer, which is so random to hear because she's always been so sophisticated. When I think of like the Teen Choice Awards, I think of Hilary Duff.
Yes, queen, slay, slay, slay your enemies, ruler of all realms of men.
You know what I'm saying? And as far as I am aware, Whitney Houston was not the equivalent to Hilary Duff at this time. But I liked Whitney as a kid, so I guess it makes sense. I just thought I was a strange kid who really liked Whitney and would perform at the grocery store, where do broken hearts go, in the middle of the produce section, having my main character moment. I watched the entirety of this 1989 Kids' Choice Awards, okay? I don't know how to explain it. Corey Feldman doing a Michael Jackson it was like a dollar store ripoff of a generic brand name product that was copying Michael Jackson. Okay, it was low. The dance moves are forever burned in my mind. The whole show was weird. Very, very 80s. The children were not the only ones feeling Whitney. Not only was she nominated for a Kids' Choice Award, but also a People's Choice Award for Best Female Artist, and she did win. August also brought Bobby Brown back around. Whitney invited him to her 26th birthday party, and he was more than happy to attend. They had tons of fun, and a lot of reports say they began dating immediately. But it wasn't until the two went to a BB and CC Winans concert. They attended the concert in LA, and then Whitney and Bobby went to an after party and dinner. That night, Bobby asked Whitney to date him officially.
Hold up. Wait a minute. Something ain't right.
However, Whitney was with another gentleman. She already had a boyfriend. Allegedly, my best educated guess is Eddie Murphy. The Eddie Murphy.
A call from Eddie Murphy?
Hello there.
Shrek, I'm a donkey. I'm a donkey, Shrek.
That is what Robin Crawford said anyway in her book. Apparently, very messy, Eddie Murphy gave Whitney a huge diamond ring for her birthday. The same birthday, her 26th birthday, the one that she invited Bobby to. Obviously, she was attracted to Bobby. Messy, messy, messy Whitney. Messy. Regardless of her dating status, to be even more messy, she agreed to date Bobby. I have a hard time saying this. I don't know how it's going to come out. Let me preface by saying, by all accounts, Bobby Brown was horrific to Whitney. We know more about it later in their relationship, but who knows what or when things were going on. So I just want to clarify. I do not think Bobby at this time, not that I knew him or know him, I don't think he was his best self. Please know that when I say I want to celebrate Whitney Houston, her life, and a big part of her life was this love. From Whitney's perspective, she was crazy in love. And at this time, when they start dating, they are having an amazing time. Bobby appealed to her rebellious side. Their relationship was very, fuck everyone else that isn't us. It's sort of like a us against the world, Bonnie and Clyde mentality. So as I mentioned a little bit ago, I'm not celebrating Bobby Brown. I'm celebrating the way he made Whitney feel at the time. Obviously that does change, and that segues into another point I want to make. I said it in part 1 and I'm gonna say it again. I'm not going to dive into the mess. We all know, we've seen, plenty of news articles, stories, documentaries, YouTube videos. We've seen it all. You can find that shit everywhere and anywhere. I'll touch on it, I'll definitely make you aware of where we're at in the timeline, what's going on at that point in the timeline. It's a part of her life. I am in no way trying to erase that part of her life. I think it's really important. This is one of the most successful artists of all time. And I feel like I've heard about none of her successes and all of her shortcomings and I don't want to say failures, but mistakes. I feel like I've heard about all of that. And I feel like there's so much light involved in Whitney's life and her story. So that's kind of my goal, to share that. But it is really difficult because there was a lot of dark shit going on in Whitney's personal life with her and Bobby. 1990 started off full steam ahead for Whitney with her Feels So Right tour. The tour was a series of sold-out concerts exclusively in Japan. Whitney had a huge space in her heart for her Japanese fans. They were incredibly loyal to her, and she wanted to show the same love and loyalty in return. And she showed love big time. She did this tour months before her next album, I'm Your Baby Tonight, was released, and the set list included several songs from the new album, giving her Japanese fans a very special exclusive preview before the rest of the world got to hear. After the mini tour wrapped, it was time for the Grammys. Whitney and Aretha's duet, It Isn't, It Wasn't, It Ain't Never Gonna Be, was nominated for Best R&B Performance by a Duo or Group with Vocal. They did not win, but the song is still fantastic. On March 8th, 1990, Whitney attended the UNCF's 46th Annual Awards and was presented with the Frederick D. Patterson Award. This was a huge honor. Frederick D. Patterson was an incredible educator. When she was honored, her humanitarian efforts were acknowledged. And I want to put a pin in that. We already know about her love for children and how generous she was. We saw her numerous benefit concerts, and Whitney has done so much more than that. I personally think her selflessness and not, playing it up for the cameras, not acting, she was truly selfless, not just when it was good for PR. I think personally that is the most extraordinary thing about Whitney. I'm gonna continue that thought in a little bit, but for now, more awards. In October of 1990, Whitney finally released her single I'm Your Baby Tonight, which was written and produced by both L.A. Reid and Babyface. Lyrically, this song was a huge departure from anything Whitney has ever done prior. This was her Can't Be Tamed era. It was very sexual, and even her voice, how would I even...
Damn it, I just really want to be fucked, just really fucked.
Let's just say you could hear the desire, the longing in her voice. It debuted at number 42 on the Billboard Hot 100, but quickly rose up the charts, and by December it was number 1 and received a gold certification. I'm Your Baby Tonight, the album, was released in early November of 1990, and it also did very well. It peaked at number 3 on the Billboard 200 and went certified 4 times platinum in the US, while selling 10 million copies worldwide. 1991 also started off with a bang, a massive bang, one of the most iconic moments in her career, music history, sports history, American pop culture history, all of the history. Whitney sang the Star-Spangled Banner at Super Bowl 25 on January 27th, 1991. Now you have to understand, because of the circumstances and because it's Whitney Houston, this was no average nor above average national anthem performance. No, this was on par with Jimi Hendrix as far as its place in pop culture. And as far as commercial success, it went above and beyond. I will explain why after I get into the meat and potatoes of this performance. Why I literally have never said meat and potatoes like in that phrase ever. This was 10 days into the Persian Gulf War. If you were there, you could feel the intensity. We were in the Gulf War at the time. It was an intense time for our country. A lot of our daughters and sons were overseas fighting. I could see in the stadium, I could see the fear, the hope, the intensity, the prayers going up. It was hope. We needed hope, to bring our babies home, and that's what it was about for me. That's what I felt when I sang that song, and the overwhelming love coming out of the stands was incredible. Her performance was not only vocally just masterful, but it was such a creative take. Whitney was very inspired by Marvin Gaye's rendition of the Star-Spangled Banner. She loved his arrangement, and she really wanted to change the status quo.
Can you see by the dawn's early light?
The arrangement was so original, executives at NFL, CBS, and even the orchestra gave a lot of pushback in the days leading up to the big game. The performance was spectacular, but days after, there was some controversy. It came out that Whitney was lip-syncing to her own pre-recorded version of the song. Accounts of the performance vary. Bob Best, an NFL pregame entertainment official, said the NFL chose to air the pre-recorded version of the song because there were too many risks involved with doing it live. Best also said in an interview with the New York Post that they played what is referred to as a production copy, which is music recorded in advance to be used if the singer has a last-minute inability to sing. This protection copy was recorded at an LA studio several days before the game. A spokesperson for Whitney said this was not a Milli Vanilli situation.
That was embarrassing. I really hope you're embarrassed. Wow.
She sang, but the microphone was turned off. He went on to explain it was a technical decision partially based on the noise factor. But then Whitney's personal publicist was like, no, our understanding is Whitney sang live into a live mic. There are so many versions of what happened, but truly it does not matter. Whitney just sang the nation's most precious piece of music. Correction, the second most precious. Back to Whitney. She sang the national anthem like an angel. Her rendition is legendary. I personally can understand why technically going live to this large of an audience, there's a lot that can go wrong. So from that standpoint, it was a great decision. Better to play it safe than not have a national anthem. And I also know that there is not a person on this earth who can sing better live than Whitney, past, present, and future. I just don't care that this was recorded in a studio allegedly for this performance. It reminds me of the Beyonce controversy. She was singing, or rather lip syncing, the Star-Spangled Banner for the presidential inauguration because she didn't have time to rehearse, and that's not a gig you want to screw up. Beyonce personally wanted to be flawless for the president and the country. So yeah, she lip synced and it was wonderful. There was a whole controversy about it. And then Beyonce had this press conference, like kind of a preview for her Super Bowl performance. Beyonce walked into the room. She asked the reporters in the room to please stand, and she belted the national anthem.
And the rockets red glare, the bombs bursting in air.
I get it for people that are up in arms about those who aren't as vocally gifted lip syncing. I know that sounds kind of mean, but I understand that, especially when there's no reason to be lip syncing. It's just not the time or place for it, and you still do. But Beyonce, Whitney Houston, you have anything to say about their live performances? The only reason for thinking this is if you think Beyonce and Whitney Houston are lazy and that's why they lip synced rather than just practicing. You think Beyonce and Whitney are lazy? Or you don't think they have great skill and they covered up their bad vocal skills live with a recording while lip syncing? Do you think that's the case for Beyonce and Whitney? No, I did not think so. So I don't understand the controversy of all of this. So dumb. Seats for everybody.
Have several seats.
Let's move on to the charts. Whitney's rendition was released as a standalone single on February 12th, 1991, and it debuted at number 32 on the Billboard Hot 100 singles chart. So what does that mean? Number one, This was Whitney's highest first week chart entry, at that time anyway. But yes, higher than even I Want to Dance with Somebody. Her national anthem peaked at number 20, and she became the first artist to have any national anthem on the chart since 1958. I looked up this version from Jose Feliciano. Please know, I'm not the most patriotic person really at all. I've never been moved by a national anthem being sung. His rendition brought me to tears. I'm not talking like sobbing, but I was like very physically affected by his performance. Not only because it was sung beautifully in like this folksy kind of way, but also the man singing the national anthem was a young Latin man who was born blind, born in Puerto Rico, then moved to Spanish Harlem. This must have been such an incredible moment for him. He was performing the nation's most precious song on the field of what could be argued as America's most precious sport on one of the biggest stages for that sport. After his amazing rendition, he was booed immediately. The American public was furious. From what I understand, it was because they did not like change. I guess that's kind of a thing even to this day. They want their Star Spangled Banner with no remix. But I'm so sorry. Please excuse my French, but these are some fucking snowflakes. You don't boo at a Bob Dylan-esque performance of the national anthem. You boo Fergie. I'll wrap up my rabbit hole dive here. Feliciano was super hurt because the American public thought it was like some sort of protest when he was like, absolutely not. This is my love for the country. It is the total opposite of a protest. And he was blackballed by radio. But his performance lives on forever. Artists are going to be inspired by it, whether it's directly or indirectly, for the rest of time. And Feliciano had the last laugh because he dropped a Christmas tune that will outlast the Twinkies.
Feliz Navidad. Feliz Navidad. Andale.
Feliz Navidad.
Swerving all the way back to Whitney's chart performance and the rendition's overall success. It spent 11 weeks on the chart and was certified gold, and the video single was 2 times platinum. In 1991, it became Arista's, which is Whitney's label, fastest selling single in the label's history. The same label that had David Bowie, Air Supply, Aretha, Stevie, Iggy Pop, Tanya Tucker. I mean, this is a top shelf label. And if charts and lists don't satisfy your success meter, how about the philanthropic success? Arista announced that all of the profits from the single, as well as the video of Whitney's national anthem, would be donated to the American Red Cross Gulf Crisis Fund, with profits in addition to Whitney's donation from her charity. $500,000 was donated. Still not successful enough for you? Okay, well, Whitney did it again. All over again. She re-released the song after the 2001 9/11 attacks, and the proceeds went to the New York Firefighters Disaster Relief Fund and the New York Fraternal Order of Police. And the song now hit the Hot 100 airplay. If you're not quite old enough to remember, after 9/11, it was definitely a very America the Beautiful time. It was very red, white, and blue. I was babysitting my great-grandmother. Again, I don't know what was going on in my life at this time, but I remember when it happened. I remembered my grandmother coming home and freaking out. So how does that relate to the Hot 100 airplay? Well, Hot 100 airplay reaches about 30 to 40 million people, patriotic people at this time. And so Whitney's rendition of the national anthem peaked at #1 on the singles chart. And Whitney made history as the first and only artist to have a national anthem hit the top 10 since the year that the Hot 100 chart specifically premiered. I know we spent a lot of time talking about the national anthem, and I know that might sound very minor. It might have seemed like a minor moment in Whitney's career, but it really isn't. This was an incredible display of talent, and it was a really special moment because it was a time that Whitney connected with the country when the country really needed connection. And not just once, she did that twice. Whitney knew that this song, this performance, was bigger than anything she'd ever done in the eyes of the American people. But also, my rabbit hole dive has some meaning because I think knowing who Whitney stands shoulder to shoulder with in pop culture history and American history is important. Now, I would love nothing more than to play her performance for you, but part 1 was brutal. Because I wanted every bit of everything in that video, every performance I could find. And I uploaded it knowing, yeah, copyright issue here and there, whatever, I'll deal with it. Like, I think that the performance being in the video was much more important. But what I didn't know is that there are some copyright restrictions that make your video basically private, so nobody could view it. So I had to re-edit that video, I think 4 times, and it might seem like, oh, just a quick snip. No, I had to go back and re-edit, and if I had to, add something else in to make it make sense or, rework it, that could take some time. But the biggest issue is the processing time, so I have to process it from my editor and then upload it onto YouTube. So I did that 4 times. From start to finish, each time takes about 6 to 8 hours. So my sleep was lacking for a few days. And I know YouTube has a specific option where they're like, hey, we can cut out this part for you, but it completely jacks up the video, so that wasn't an option for me. Another year meant another Grammy nomination. I'm Your Baby Tonight was nominated for Best Pop Vocal, but lost to the hottest new thing in music, Mariah Carey, for the song Vision of Love. Later in the month, Whitney appeared on Saturday Night Live as the musical guest, performing her newest single, All the Man That I Need, and of course, I'm Your Baby Tonight. A huge moment in any celebrity's career, SNL is and was a big deal. Whitney did not get much downtime before starting the I'm Your Baby Tonight World Tour in March of 1991. This tour was definitely more of a visual spectacle. I mentioned in part 1 that Whitney was known for her beautifully simple performances. But Whitney definitely amped it up for this tour. She took it to another level, really. She had state-of-the-art lighting and a very elaborate stage. It was very wild for Whitney. Whitney toured for most of 1991, but no surprise, she made time to give back. She planned a concert for U.S. troops that would air on HBO, Welcome Home Heroes. The concert aired live on HBO and was the highest rated program at that time. All proceeds from this event went to the Red Cross. While singing all over the globe, Whitney released her next 2 singles, Miracle, which peaked at number 9 on the Billboard Hot 100, and My Name Is Not Susan, which peaked at number 20. I know it's a lot of logistics I'm going over, but this was a very busy year for Whitney business-wise. And it was also a horrific year for touring. Tons of artists were canceling dates and playing to low-capacity crowds. Whitney was no exception. She actually had to cancel quite a few dates due to poor ticket sales, and this is Whitney Houston. There was a recession and financial issues galore, so experts cite that as the reason for this. But whatever the reason, it was not a good time. While on tour, Whitney also developed a throat ailment, which forced her to cancel the final Canadian dates of the tour. She got some rest and did recover, and when she came back hard, performing 10 consecutive nights at Wembley, surpassing her own record. Overall, the I'm Your Baby Tonight World Tour had 3 legs in Asia, North America, and Europe, and had 96 shows total. I couldn't find any financial information about the tour, but I'm assuming it wasn't as amazing as it could be, given the financial climate at this time. A month and a half after the tour concluded in Paris, Whitney moved on to an even bigger task. I just referred to a world tour as a task. You know what I mean. In December 1991, Whitney began production on her first feature film, The Bodyguard. If you thought we spent some serious time on the national anthem, Buckle up. But before we jump on the Bodyguard roller coaster, we're gonna do a Bobby Brown check-in because things were getting very serious for the couple at this time. He spent a lot of time with her while she was on tour. They got to bond while seeing the world together. And in September 1991, Bobby proposed to Whitney. The two seemed to have slightly different recollections of the proposal. Brown said it was in the back of a car, and Whitney was elated and begged for the car to pull over. In 1993, Whitney told Rolling Stone that she initially said no because she was very independent and marriage was not in the plans for her. And it wasn't until his second proposal that she said yes. So Whitney was now an engaged woman. She was planning a future with Bobby and wanted to start a family, and she was also starting her film career. Whitney moving into the film space wasn't a shock to anyone. She had been reading scripts for years, and nothing minor either. Quincy Jones and Spike Lee offered her roles, and she was sought after for sure. Whitney tossed around options for roles until she was offered something perfect. And then The Bodyguard came. The Bodyguard is about a pop singer who has been receiving threatening notes, and her manager hires a bodyguard known for his gold star guarding of bodies. He is pretty intense about safety and tightens security more than the singer really feels is necessary. And eventually, the bodyguard named Frank starts an affair with Rachel, the singer. Kevin Costner was determined to get Whitney in this film. He campaigned to have her play Rachel, and he even told Whitney he wouldn't do the role without her. And Kevin, in my opinion, he was the mastermind behind The Bodyguard. The two immediately clicked. They bonded over growing up in the Baptist church and shared their knowledge with one another. Whitney taught Kevin how to sing, and he, in return, gave her acting lessons. He was careful, though. He and the director discouraged Whitney from having actual acting lessons. They wanted her to be as natural as possible. And Whitney did quite well, I thought. Her natural personality was what they were looking for, and she was told to think of every scene like a song. And I think that advice worked perfect for her. Some of the biggest stars of the time were considered for the role of Rachel. Pat Benatar, Olivia Newton-John, Debbie Harry, Janet Jackson, Terry Nunn, Dolly Parton, and even Joan Jett. That would have been a totally different movie. I think I would like to see that film. I vote Joan Jett for the sequel. Or you know what? Kristen Stewart. She does a really good Joan Jett. She could do it. Costner, who was also a producer, reportedly even denied Madonna an audition because she made kind of a nasty gag joke at his expense. And you might think, oh, that's kind of catty of Kevin Costner, but no, this was Madonna being a self-absorbed diva, in my opinion.
You were great.
Thank
you. You were
you.
great. Thanks for having us. That was really generous.
Thanks for coming.
We thought it was neat. You know?
Neat?
Yeah, really neat. Yeah.
No one's ever described it quite that way. Hi.
Yeah. Okay. Have fun tonight. I don't think we'll be making that other deal.
Oh, really? Not neat enough for you?
Nah, well, not quite. No, we got to put the kids. We got to get with the kids.
Okay.
So I'm gonna give them this.
All right. Thanks.
God bless. Thanks.
I respect what Ms. Donna has done for pop music and the culture and fashion. Obviously, she's an icon. I'm not denying that. But I am personally not a fan of her personality, the music.
Wow, this is garbage. You actually like this?
Of course, I don't know her, so maybe she's as pleasant as a peach, but based off of this clip, not so much. And don't you know what neat means, Madonna? Like, do I need to inform you what, neat means? The critical response to The Bodyguard was mixed. A lot thought it was cheesy and melodramatic. Audiences seem to be across the board. There's surveys where audiences give it a B+, an F, and A-. It's all over the place, but what no one could deny was that The Bodyguard was a box office smash hit. Ultimately, it grossed $121.9 million domestically and $411 million worldwide. It was the second highest grossing film of 1992 and was nominated for an NAACP Image Award and also racked up a handful of MTV Movie Award nominations, ultimately winning Best Song from a Movie for I Will Always Love You. Now let's talk about that song, the biggest artistic piece of Whitney Houston's career. Whitney co-executive produced the soundtrack, and she recorded 6 songs for the album. The lead single, of course, I Will Always Love You, was actually written by Dolly Parton in 1974. Fun fact, Dolly wrote I Will Always Love You and Jolene in the same day. Dolly clearly ate her Wheaties that morning. I cannot express to you how unbelievably popular this song was. It is widely considered Whitney's Tour de France. Costner, again, the mastermind, was like, hey, let's just start it a cappella. And Whitney's record company was like, shut up. What the fuck do you know about anything? Not know. An a cappella opening for a song will never work. But Whitney loved it. And her and Costner insisted on keeping it that way, and good thing. It debuted at number 40 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart and became Whitney's 10th number 1 entry 2 weeks later. It also dominated all the other Billboard charts and spent 11 weeks atop the Hot 100 airplay chart. The song remained number 1 on the mainstream top 40 charts for 9 consecutive weeks, becoming the longest running single that chart had ever seen at the time. The song remained on the top 40 chart for 24 weeks, and it became the record label Arista's biggest hit of all time. So here's my dilemma. The mid-90s were a very busy time for Whitney and easily her most successful years, and I have, no joke, about 20 pages of notes about Whitney's successes and little rabbit hole facts, but if I followed those notes, this would be a 9-parter, and I'd really like to keep it to 2 parts. So what I'm going to do is just sort of rattle off her achievements. And I Will Always Love You alone, the achievements could fit 15 pages. It is so unbelievably successful. Whitney recorded 6 songs for the soundtrack, and of course, I Will Always Love You was the star. The song was number 1 in just about every country, and it had near dominion over MTV and radio. I have a funny story. I wasn't going to share this because I didn't want to dive down another rabbit hole, but I'll make it quick. I may get some details wrong, but basically, I believe it was a couple in England sued their neighbor because she was playing this song so loudly, so many times in a row. She must have played this nonstop for weeks because they sued her and they won. She had to pay. I don't know if it was like a fine. I'm assuming it was to them because they said that it was the equivalent of torture. True story. Interestingly enough, radio stations refused to play the song on the grounds that listeners would be turned off by its quiet a cappella opening. But they switch up that stance a week after its release. Whitney, as I've said before, was very confident in her ability to sing, but she was never smug about her success. When it came to I Will Always Love You and that song's success, Whitney said she was actually embarrassed by it. She thought she wasn't nearly as exciting as people may have thought, because the success itself was incredibly exciting. I Will Always Love You was ranked the number 1 single of 1992, then made the countdown again in 1993, where it ranked number 9, marking the first time any musical act had the same single ranked in the top 10 of the year-end review 2 years in a row. It was an international hit, topping the singles charts in just about every country, and it broke records everywhere. It sold approximately 400,000 copies in its second week, making it the best-selling song in a single week. Then it went on to break its own record in the following 3 weeks, peaking at 632,000 copies. I Will Always Love You was certified 4 times platinum at the beginning of 1993. This made Whitney Houston the first female artist with a single to reach that level in Recording Industry Association of America's history. More recently, on January 12th, 2022, the single was certified diamond, becoming the second eldest song in history to do so, following only the greatest song of all time, Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen. Whitney Houston is only one of 3 women in history to have a diamond album and a diamond single. The other 2 being Mariah Carey and Taylor Swift, legends of course. I Will Always Love You was certified 2 times platinum in the UK and platinum in Germany. In Japan, it became the best-selling single by a foreign female at that time. And then there were the Grammys again, and then there were the Grammys, or then there was the Grammys. That sounds more right, but you know. Grammatical nonsense. In 1994, I Will Always Love You won Record of the Year and Best Female Pop Vocal Performance. The latter was Houston's 3rd win, and Dolly Parton was there to present the award to Whitney, which was such a special moment. There was some rumblings about a feud between her and Dolly, but it was completely untrue. First of all, Whitney got Dolly a lot of fat paychecks. Her rendition of I Will Always Love You is paying for a lot of college tuition for the employees at Dollywood, okay? So I imagine Dolly was cheering Whitney on more than anyone. And Dolly has praised Whitney's rendition too. She loves it. So there was no beef, and it was really great to share that moment of success for not just Whitney, but for Dolly as well. In 1993, she won Best R&B Single Female at the Soul Train Music Awards for I Will Always Love You, won Favorite Female Music Performer and Favorite New Music Video at the People's Choice Awards. At the MTV Movie Awards, I Will Always Love You won Best Song from a Movie. She won 11 Billboard Music Awards, including 2 special awards, Top Album of the Year, #1 World Artist, #1 World Single, and of course, many more. Rolling into 1994, she won 5 awards at the NAACP Image Awards, including Entertainer of the Year, Outstanding Female Artist for The Bodyguard, Outstanding Album, Outstanding Soundtrack, and I'm Every Woman won Best Music Video. At the 21st AMAs, Whitney set a record, becoming the first female with the most wins in one night. She won Best Soul R&B Album, Best Pop Rock Album, which is the first time in history I believe that had ever been done, as well as Adult Contemporary Album. She also won Best Female Artist in the Pop Rock category and the Soul R&B category and Artist Adult Contemporary category. And then, of course, won for Pop Rock Single, Soul R&B Single, and she also won the 1994 Merit Award at the AMAs. At the 8th Soul Train Music Awards, Whitney won the Sammy Davis Jr. Award as Entertainer of the Year, and I Will Always Love You won Best R&B Song of the Year. And finally, at the World Music Awards, Whitney won Best Selling Overall Recording Artist, Pop Artist of the Year, R&B Artist of the Year, American Recording Artist of the Year, and Female Recording Artist of the Era. Now remember, all of those awards have World Best Selling in front of every single one. I just didn't want to be redundant. The Bodyguard soundtrack, I Will Always Love You, and Whitney were on an incredible, legendary, record-breaking award season win streak. This song is still smashing it. In 2015, it was named the #1 song of the rock era. In 2020, the song was selected by the Library of Congress for preservation in the National Recording Registry for being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. And in 2021, it was listed at number 94 on Rolling Stone's 500 Greatest Songs of All Time. So obviously, this was an incredibly successful time in Whitney's career, but the real win was in her personal life. After 3 years of dating, Whitney Houston married Bobby Brown in a lavish ceremony at the pair's estate in New Jersey. Whitney wore a bespoke wedding dress with a floor-length silk veil and a matching bead and sequin cloche hat. This look did not come cheap. This was about $40,000. But this was the wedding of the decade. No expense was spared. They had their close friends and family, dozens of celebrities, and entertainment tycoons in attendance, and they got to witness Bobby and Whitney exchange vows in a romantic garden gazebo adorned with 8,000 lavender and purple roses and hundreds of orchids. The two were very nervous. Bobby even said in his book he was freaking out in the bathroom, looking at himself in the mirror like, oh my god, what if she doesn't love me? But T, his friend, Alicia Etheridge, I believe her name is, was the one to kind of talk him down and get him out there to marry Whitney. And that same Alicia Etheridge married Bobby Brown in 2012, so I thought that was interesting.
T girl.
The ceremony felt extremely intimate, even though this was not a small wedding. It was a fairy tale. The two exchanged these enthusiastic I do's, very, very dramatic. They had doves released into the air, and Bobby literally lifted his new bride in the air. The reception was insane. They entertained about 800 guests in this air-conditioned, carpeted ballroom tent that was literally constructed on the lawn of their estate. It was every bit as extravagant as the ceremony. They served chilled peach soup, grilled Chateaubriand. They also had Jersey chicken and collard greens. It was a perfect balance. They also had an 18-layer cake that was made up of strawberry, lemon mousse, and banana cake. And I would like a slice of each of those flavors, to be honest. That sounds delicious. Robin Crawford recalled in her memoir that there were issues only days into their honeymoon. She also said Whitney returned with a visible scar on her face from a cut that was at least 3 inches. It went from the top of her cheek to her jaw. Whitney insisted that this was no big deal and sort of brushed it off with a couples argue all the time sort of excuse. This is not normal behavior, just in case you weren't aware or you need clarification or need reassurance. Whitney was finishing up the Bodyguard soundtrack, and Bobby Brown was busy promoting an album, and he had a tour to plan. All of those plans would be paused when Whitney confirmed that she was in fact pregnant in September 1992. This was such an incredible feeling for Whitney. She had shared a few years later that she suffered a miscarriage while filming The Bodyguard, which was emotionally and physically very painful for her. Whitney was mostly focused on labor and being a mama, so she was incredibly grounded. On March 4th, 1993, Whitney gave birth to a beautiful little girl.
This is Bobby Christina Brown. I don't think I will ever do anything greater than have a baby. I mean, it is the most incredible thing I have ever experienced in my life. And I've been a lot of places and I've seen a lot of faces. But this right here, only God can do.
Following the success of The Bodyguard, Whitney embarked on another world tour. The tour kicked off in July 1993, and this tour was wild. This was her biggest tour easily. It had 8 legs in North America, Asia, Europe, South America, and Africa, for a total of 120 dates. The tour brought in $33 million, which is about $64 million when adjusted for inflation. Not only was it a financial success, critically, this tour was highly praised. Whitney had excellent control and authority, and of course, the ballads were the highlight of the show. During the second leg of the North American tour in 1994, Whitney performed at the opening ceremony of the '94 FIFA World Cup at the Rose Bowl Stadium. During that time, Whitney again suffered from throat ailments and had to cancel 8 shows. But all of those were rescheduled a month later. The success of this tour, combined with her successful movie and a successful soundtrack, helped Whitney make the Forbes magazine's Richest Entertainers list. Whitney herself earned over $33 million during '93 and '94, making her the 3rd highest female entertainer that year, after Oprah and Barbra Streisand. Of course, as always, she shared the love in a very big way as well. Whitney was the first major musician to visit and perform in South Africa following the election of Nelson Mandela as president. She organized 3 concerts, one being a special that was broadcast live from Johannesburg on HBO. Whitney then donated the proceeds from the concert to South American charities, including 2 children's museums, the President's Trust Fund, the Cagiso Foundation, and several orphanages. This was a grand event, and probably my favorite live performance of I Will Always Love You happened at this event. There were gazillions of people watching. And when she sang,
"And I will always love you and you and you,"
obviously she did that much better than I did. That's why she's Whitney Houston and I'm not Whitney Houston. But basically, I love this performance because it felt like she was singing to you. It felt like she loved every single person there. I don't know, it just felt so genuine and personal, and you can tell that Mandela and the people of South Africa meant a great deal to her. You can feel the love that she has every second of this performance. Around this time, and I don't know for certain, I'm just making an educated guess, Whitney was filming her next project, Waiting to Exhale. The film is based on the best-selling novel by Terry McMillan. It follows 4 friends who get together frequently to support one another and vent about life. They each want a relationship, but have their own struggles finding love. Whitney and her co-stars, including the fantastic Angela Bassett, seemed to get along great, and they were great together on camera. Forrest Whitaker praised Whitney as well. He said there was absolutely no diva behavior from her. We are slowly getting into what I refer to as the dark days. So there are going to be bits of mess that fall out of the closet. This is one of those times. Allegedly, Whitney did OD on the set of Waiting to Exhale, and it halted production for 7 days. This was alleged by her former bodyguard. I don't think it's a coincidence that at the peak of her success, things started to spiral and not so great things started to emerge from the shadows. Waiting to Exhale was released on December 22nd, 1995. It got mixed reviews from critics but had great financial success, opening number 1 at the North American box office and grossed $14 million its opening weekend. That's a big release date, right at Christmas, so very, very impressive. Of course, Whitney had her hands in the soundtrack as well, which featured Exhale Shoop Shoop by Whitney, and Whitney had a song with CeCe Winans as well. Multiple songs from the album, not just Whitney's, reached the top 10 on Billboard's Hot 100 chart. Whitney chose the role of Savannah Jackson, a TV producer in love with a married man, because she saw the film as, quote, breakthrough for the image of Black women because it presents them as both professionals and as caring mothers. This film was really important because it proved that a movie primarily targeting a Black audience can cross over to success while paving the way for all other movies that had an all-Black cast, such as How Stella Got Her Groove Back and the Tyler Perry movies.
Honey, I've been to jail. I will shank you, fool.
Waiting to Exhale also didn't use the stereotypes that were horrific and rampant in media and that didn't accurately portray Black people in America. The film portrayed Black women as strong, middle-class citizens rather than those stereotypes. This role was important for Whitney because it kind of shook off that dramatic role of Rachel from The Bodyguard, very soap opera. It was a fresher role for her. Whitney's performance even got her nominated for an NAACP award for Outstanding Actress in a Motion Picture. Exhale Shoop Shoop became just the 3rd single in the music industry to debut at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100, after Michael Jackson's You Are Not Alone and Mariah Carey's Fantasy. It spent a record 11 weeks at the number 2 spot atop the R&B chart, and the soundtrack itself was certified 7 times platinum. 7 times! Just so you have like a full understanding of where that's at in history, AC/DC's Highway to Hell, Fleetwood Mac's Self-Titled. And as far as soundtracks go, there really aren't many that are more successful. Obviously, The Bodyguard, number 1 forever, but Frozen, Titanic, Footloose, Top Gun, these are the soundtrack success neighbors to Waiting to Exhale. Not too shabby. Aside from the obvious career stuff, Whitney was honored for her philanthropy by the VH1 Honors in 1995 for her seemingly endless donations to charity. Whitney also continued on a whirlwind cycle of press, appearances, and award shows. And then Whitney had an iconic performance a private concert for the wedding of Princess Rashida, the eldest of the Sultan of Brunei. Whitney was reportedly paid $7 million to perform. The media said that Whitney was handed a blank check and was instructed to fill it out with what she felt she deserved. And that is the only way you could have paid Whitney. That is correct. I feel like that's exactly what happened with that recent Beyonce Dubai performance. I'm sure they're just like, here's a blank check, girl. Give us the Beyonce number. Side note, her performance in Brunei gave me my favorite Whitney Houston song of all time, her live performance of I Have Nothing. She jumped back into film, but went in a bit of a different direction when she starred in the holiday comedy The Preacher's Wife with none other than Denzel Washington.
King Kong ain't got shit on me!
Whitney played the gospel-singing wife of a pastor, and it's basically an updated remake of the 1948 film The Bishop's Wife. Whitney earned $10 million for the role, making her one of the highest paid actresses in Hollywood. Not a bad year money-wise for Whitney, clearly. The film itself was released on December 13th, 1996, another Christmas time release, and it made about $50 million, so it was a moderate success. Whitney got her best reviews from that role, though. She was described as angelic, with divine talent, gentle, yet spirited, especially when she sang. Her role also won her another NAACP award, and the accompanying soundtrack sold 6 million copies worldwide, making it the largest selling gospel album of all time. As 1996 rolled into 1997, Whitney won an AMA for Favorite Adult Contemporary Artist for the soundtrack. She had a mini tour to support the Preacher's Wife soundtrack. She was being a mother. And her production company was ramping up, which was originally named after Whitney herself, but it was renamed this year to Brown House Productions. Brown House. Not so fun fact. I do believe, as do others close to Whitney, that Whitney did this to appease her husband, who was extraordinarily jealous of all of her success. And Whitney did this as a gesture, like, see, we are equal. Regardless of name, the production company had big plans. The goal was to, quote, show aspects of the lives of African Americans that have not been brought to screen before. Their first project was a spectacular film, and a film I cannot stress enough was such a formative part of my childhood: the made-for-TV remake of Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella. In addition to co-producing, Whitney Houston starred in the film as the fairy godmother, which was my very first introduction to her, and where I fell in love with her and that dress. And I fell in love with her co-star Brandy, whose dress was also just spectacular. This cast was stacked with major stars. You had Whoopi Goldberg, Bernadette Peters, Jason Alexander. I mean, it was really star-studded. This remake of Cinderella is notable for the multiracial cast, which was so amazing. I feel really lucky that I had this movie. It was a story I love, with characters and families that looked as diverse as mine. That matters, especially to kids. Whitney was serious about her mission, and she was successful. Just with this film alone, she did much more. But this was a great launchpad. 60 million viewers tuned in to the ABC special, which gave the network its highest TV ratings in 16 years. The film also received 7 Emmy nominations and 1 Outstanding Direction in a variety, musical, or comedy special. Whitney rounded out 1997 by giving back, yes, yet again, when she honored her idols, Aretha Franklin, Diana Ross, and Dionne Warwick, by performing their hits during a 3-night HBO concert. You know, a classic Whitney situation. She loved her HBO, or HBO loved her, or it was mutual. The concert was live in DC, and the special raised over $300,000 for the Children's Defense Fund. In 1997, Whitney also received the Quincy Jones Award for Outstanding Career Achievements in the Field of Entertainment at the 12th Soul Train Music Awards. And I mean, wow, not even 10 years ago, Whitney was booed and ostracized at this same award show. The lighting just got super wild. I do apologize. I always thought Whitney had so much confidence for handling the whole booing and Soul Train Awards nonsense very well. She handled that so well. Whitney returned year after year after year after, you know, kind of being treated like crap. I would have been mortified the first booing. I would have been like, no, I'll stay till the end of the show. I'll show respect, but I will never return again. But no, Whitney went time and time again. I feel like she may have thought of it as a professional, which it is, a professional responsibility. And I feel like she's gone to every award show, even during her dark times. Actually, I believe the 2001 Grammys she didn't attend. That's the only thing that I can think of off the top of my head, and I have tracked her timeline a stupid amount. But you know what happened that year? The Baha Men won a Grammy for Who Let the Dogs Out. So Whitney missed history happening right before her eyes. Speaking of the Baha Men, I have this memory that could very well just be a fever dream, but I remember when I was a little kid, me and my older sister, we wrote letters to Nick Lachey of 98 Degrees for the Youngins, that is the co-host of Love is Blind, and my dad went to deliver them to their hotel because they were on tour in our city, and I guess the Baha Men might have been touring with them. I don't know why the Baha Men were there. Again, that's why I think this is a fever dream, but I very clearly remember my dad coming back and being like, I'm friends with the Baha Men, I hung out with the Baha Men, and I'm like, what? I was so young. This very well could be a I'm gonna verify this, actually. Pause. I could just easily ask my dad if he even remembers, but we'll see. Hi, Dad. I have a question.
Do you really?
I do. Okay, remember when me... Listen, I need you to use your memory. Remember when me and JC were super young and we wrote letters to Nick Lachey or 98 Degrees and you were like delivering it to him in a hotel and you said you saw the Baha Men in the halls? Did you really see the Baha Men? Or were you lying to us?
It wasn't in the halls. It was out in their truck.
Oh, they were in there. Were you like within arm's reach? Oh, on their bus. So you just saw their bus. You didn't see. Oh, you said what up? They beat everyone at the Grammys the year Who Let the Dogs Out came out. They beat like J-Lo and Moby and Enrique Iglesias at the Grammys.
Yeah.
I think it was called for.
I was wondering, like, what's up? We just kind of, you know.
They were nice.
We smoked marijuana.
Oh, Dad. That's a really big achievement. I'm so proud of you.
It's not a big achievement.
No, that's amazing. I'm so proud of you. You were like a groupie for the Baha Men. the soundtrack to the Rugrats. You were a groupie.
I don't think so.
I think you were. Okay, wow. I wasn't expecting that to go that way. Ladies and gentlemen, my father, the coolest to ever do it. Besties with the Baha Men. Where did we even leave off? Whitney at the Soul Train Awards getting honored. That's where we left off. Okay. I'm trying to stay out of the sunlight, so I apologize if I'm like not completely over here. This must have been an incredibly fulfilling moment for Whitney. She was finally getting the respect that she deserved. There is a bit of a gap in Whitney's public life in 1998, and from all the research I've done, it was like early 1998 she kind of disappeared and didn't return until late 1998, around November at the 25th People's Choice Awards, and continued the award circuits with the AMAs, NAACP Awards, Soul Train Awards, Dove Awards, because I guess that was or is a thing. All of this was likely promotion for her first single off her upcoming album, the single being When You Believe. This song was related to the motion picture, the DreamWorks musical animated feature, The Prince of Egypt. Whitney was joined by fellow diva, one that many said was the next or the new Whitney, Mariah Carey. Despite the heavy-hitting divas recording the song, it only saw moderate success on the charts, but it was awarded Best Original Song at the 71st Academy Awards. There were rumblings of animosity between these two, but both Mariah and Whitney denied this. Obviously, we have seen, some moments where that does not seem to be true, but you never know. I'm sure there was a teensy bit of competition. But whatever was the truth, the media reported that they couldn't stand each other and had to record their parts separately. Which, by the way, from what I understand, that is totally normal for two artists to record a duet separately at separate times. I'm sure they were both incredibly busy, and finding a time that would work for both of them to spend the day in the studio was probably near impossible. When You Believe also won a Critics' Choice Award, was nominated for a Golden Globe and a Grammy. Whitney spent most of the early and mid-90s working on motion pictures and their soundtracks. But the time had come for a new page to turn. Well, not really a new page, an old page, but a newly turned old page. Whitney released her first studio album in 8 years, My Love Is Your Love, on November 17th, 1998. This album was star-studded as far as producers go. Babyface again, she worked great with him. Clive Davis again, Miss Lauryn Hill, Wyclef Jean, Missy Elliott, Rodney Jenkins, aka Darkchild, and so much more talent on top of that. This album introduced more hip-hop elements that was only sprinkled throughout her previous work. Whitney spent August through October recording this album. That was supposed to be just a greatest hits album with a couple of new songs, but Whitney was having so much fun in these recording sessions. They were spirited, and again, she was having a good time, but they were also really good. It was very successful. She was pumping out bop after bop, and so it turned into a full studio album. It debuted and peaked at number 13 on the Billboard Hot 200 chart, which isn't the greatest for Whitney, but I mean, it's nothing to scoff at, not at all. I think this album was more of a personal success for Whitney because she got to explore and play with different genres and styles of music. This was a much funkier and edgier album, and it had everything from reggae to Whitney's beloved ballads. The album just spit out singles from 1998 all the way to 2000. So I'm just gonna shout those out and then get back to the relevant timeline. The song Heartbreak Hotel, which featured Faith Evans and Kelly Price, stayed at the #1 spot on the R&B chart for 7 weeks. It's Not Right, But It's Okay, another personal favorite of mine, won Whitney her 6th Grammy, and all of her singles except When You Believe became #1 hits on the Billboard Hot Dance Club Play chart. My Love Is Your Love, the album itself, sold 4 million copies in America, making it certified 4 times platinum, and it sold 11 million copies worldwide. This album gave Whitney some of her strongest reviews ever. Rolling Stone said she sang with a bite in her voice, and I think that is the perfect way to put it. Even the softer songs have some edge and some grit to them. The Village Voice also said this album was, quote, Whitney's sharpest and most satisfying so far. In 1999, Whitney received the Child Advocate of the Year Award given by the Deirdre O'Brien Child Advocacy Center. She also performed live at an MTV Pride event, which, babes, this is 1999, and Whitney had a large religious fan base. Of course, not all who practice religion, specifically Christianity, are homophobic or hateful. I'm in no way saying that, but let's be honest with ourselves and have a real moment of reflection. 1999, religious fan base, and you're doing a Pride event? That's a risky career move. Not saying that she shouldn't have done it, that's amazing, but I'm just saying there's risk involved, and she took that risk. When asked by a reporter why she chose to do the Pride event, she simply said they asked, and I said okay. I feel like the actions speak much louder than the words in this case. She didn't need to explain herself. She flew to New York to participate in an event that could have been a blemish on her career, and also took time away from her tour, which started about a week or 2 prior to the event, and I think that says a lot about her as a person. That tour, the My Love Is Your Love tour, was another world tour, but definitely not her biggest. It only had 2 legs and 67 dates. I say only, I mean for Whitney in comparison. So only when it comes to Whitney. The tour itself made about $5 million, which is $10 million when adjusted for inflation. This was a very cool tour though. Whitney wanted the audience to feel her, so she turned down most arena dates in favor of theaters. She wanted that jam session atmosphere. She also signed a deal with Dolce & Gabbana to design all of her clothes for tour, which really modernized Whitney's look and gave her that bite, as Rolling Stone said, that matched her new music. all around, this was just a totally different vibe for Whitney. This was her Disturbia, Good Girl Gone Bad, sharp angled bob era, her Reputation era, which I think was great for her creatively. More cracks started to appear during the North American leg of her tour. There were reports of strange and erratic behavior behind the scenes. Whitney canceled some dates, including 2 in her hometown, and pulled out of a San Francisco show 15 minutes before it was scheduled to begin. Whitney claimed that all cancellations were due to an ongoing throat ailment. Whether this was true or not, the tabloids and media reported that this was all to do with drugs. Later in 1999, Whitney took part in Divas Live with Shaka Khan, Tina Turner, Mary J. Blige, Elton John, Brandy, Cher, Leanne Rimes, Faith Hill. I mean, it was unbelievable. The event was recorded in April and released later, but it was so iconic. The same month that Divas Live aired, the Bodyguard won Soundtrack of the Century, awarded by the Recording Industry Association of America, so pretty legit, as well as the top-selling R&B Artist of the Century, with certified 51 million copies at that time. Whitney rounded out 1999 with an MTV Europe Music Award, an International Dance Award, and an Edison Award. We have made it to the new millennia, which unfortunately is when Whitney began to unravel. She did start the year 2000 strong, won Artist of the Decade at the 14th Soul Train Music Awards, and a slew of other awards. She also released that Greatest Hits album that she was meant to release her previous album, but it turned into that studio album instead. And it did very well, peaking at number 5 in the US, number 1 in the UK, and in the top 10 in just about every other country. But in the midst of these amazing career moments, things in her personal life were breaking down. She was canceling more appearances. There were continued reports of erratic behavior. Rumors about drugs and abuse with her husband Bobby were everywhere. And Whitney was physically withering away.
Everybody watching this
is going to be staring at you physically. And they're going to be saying, how thin is she now?
Yeah.
How many bones can we see? Is she sick? The Michael Jackson VH1 appearance. The bones, that's real.
Yeah, my bones, yeah. I'm 5'7" and thin.
But that's not just thin, it's scary thin.
First of all, let's get one thing straight. Crack is cheap. I make too much money to ever smoke crack. Let's get that straight, okay? We don't do crack. We don't do that. Crack is whack.
If you had to name the devil for you, the biggest devil among them?
That would be me.
Whitney had a lot to be proud of, even in her darkest times. Her album, Just Whitney, was certified platinum and had the highest first week sales of any album that she's ever released. She won award after award. She had this record-breaking contract, success with her production company. But it seemed like for every amazing high, there was a devastating low for her. Whitney, in my opinion, really needed her family at this time, and even that was disintegrating. Her father and her were allegedly estranged due to the lawsuit he smacked against her, and Whitney's marriage was in a horrible place. She was put through some awful abuse. Both were toxic, I'm sure of that. And I admit I am biased, but Whitney really did try with her husband. I believe that with my whole heart. She did that stupid fucking reality show, which okay. So I kind of wanted to keep Bobby Christina in a separate sort of section. I didn't want to discuss her with like the dark days, even though she was very much a part of that. I kind of wanted to honor her in her own segment. But this reality show, it's pretty illuminating in my opinion, and it sheds a lot of light on what this poor baby went through. As I mentioned, Whitney was toxic too. It was not just Bobby, but in this show, being Bobby Brown, Whitney had some less than flattering moments, and some of those moments did include her daughter. I watched every episode of Being Bobby Brown, and to be blunt, it was awful from top to bottom. During the show, Whitney and Bobby are very clearly under the influence most of the time, if not all the time. Whitney really seemed like she hated the fame and really just wanted privacy for her family and for herself. Bobby, literally in the show, admits that he got into the business for the fans. Whitney went in for the music, for the love of the art, for the love of singing. He was like, no, I wanted the people and the fans. That's why I joined the industry. Bobby loved when fans came up to him and would ask for a picture and would freak out.
Can I take a picture? No. Sure. You can take a picture of me.
Yes, thank you.
I say no, he says yes. Perfect.
Take a picture. Go ahead.
It's Whitney Houston, Bobby Brown.
Whitney Houston.
Come on, let's go.
Bobby
How you
Brown.
doing? Sure.
I don't know who Bobby Brown is.
You know?
No,
You don't listen to music, do you?
not to know. People know.
All the guys.
I wrote the song My Prerogative, Getaway, Humping Around, Roni, Rock With You. You don't know me, huh? I married Whitney Houston. Now you know me, huh? Ain't that about it, bitch?
Let me shake the hand.
Excuse me, Mr. Sorry,
Mrs. Brown.
Excuse Brown, sorry.
Usher? I got to the airport, they was like, Whitney Houston and Puff Daddy. How should I know you? I'm Bobby Brown.
He was very hammy. He loved the spotlight, loved attention, probably still does, I don't know. And to me, it really seemed like he tried to make Whitney seem mean for saying no to fans. She would tell rude-ass people, like, no, I don't want to take a picture right now. I'm having dinner with my family. I'd like a little privacy. There were dozens of people in this shot just staring at her at a pool while she's trying to have lunch with her family. And it really gave me a glimpse into Whitney's POV when she's at a pool with her family, just trying to relax and have fun, and everyone's staring. Today, they'd all have their phone out, just on you, just staring at you.
Now y'all gonna stand around staring at me, right? Oh, no, no! Oh, don't do that, please. I'm with my family, please. What's behind you? What's behind you? Oh, no. You just, like, give me a minute, like, okay?
And it's creepy. It's weird. As someone who does not like to be perceived, I'm like,
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
huh, worst nightmare. No, thank you. Back to the parenting thing. I'm very aware that using drugs while trying to parent a child is bad. I'm very aware my mother was addicted to heroin from the time I was a small child to an adult, really. And I actually found myself choking up when I would see Bobby Christina's reactions to the way her parents were acting at sometimes, just her facial expressions and her body language. I don't know how to explain it. I understood. I was like, I know exactly what you're feeling right now. I love how I slowly have just been taking off jewelry throughout this video. Like, bye-bye necklace, bye-bye earring, bye-bye other earring. The light, clearly you can see outside, has changed. I've been filming for too long. I remember being her age and being out in public with my mom when she was very much under the influence, and it was embarrassing, and I felt like that's the closest word I can use to explain what I saw, at least Bobby Christina was feeling. It was almost like she was very aware of what was happening. Obviously, this is not about me. This was just a connection that I didn't realized that I'd feel with Bobby Christina, and it was immediate as soon as I saw her on this show. It was heartbreaking, and I say all that to say, and this might sound strange to some if they haven't gone through it, but there were moments while Whitney was very clearly under the influence, and she still had these moments of being an amazing mother. I do feel like Whitney tried her best while unfortunately having addiction. And sadly, I'll say it almost seemed like Whitney was normal. Again, my idea of a normal childhood, a normal mother is very, very different than the average person's, but she seemed normal. She was very protective of her daughter. She was monitoring the length of her skirt. In one episode, the two go shopping together, and, you know, Bobby Christina picked out all these outfits, and Whitney's like, okay, yeah, you're gonna try those on, but I'm throwing some clothes over too, because I want you to try on some clothes that I like as well.
Try one more time for me, let's see. No. Please, please.
Those ain't fitting. She got a body, baby. She's a burn. She got a body.
She was Houston, we wouldn't have this.
Yeah, what? Is she in Houston, what?
Wouldn't have this problem.
She ain't in Houston, she a brown.
I'm so happy about that.
Don't get it twisted.
I have never heard someone say so many wrong things, one after the other, consecutively in a row.
So normal moments, crazy not so normal moments when your mom's a celebrity and addicted to drugs, and also those moments where she was really fierce and really protective of her child. The show was not well received by critics. The Hollywood Reporter said, quote, undoubtedly the most disgusting and execrable, I don't know that word, that's an SAT word, I didn't take the SATs.
What?
What does that say, Anaya?
What?
No!
What?
Series to ever ooze its way onto television. And I think that's putting it nicely, if I'm being quite honest with you. However, the show gave Bravo its highest rating in its time slot. That doesn't surprise me. It was a train wreck, and I mean, that is what we love about reality television. I prefer a Love Island or Kitchen Nightmares, but to each their own. It was also really jarring and interesting for fans to see Whitney in her personal life. She was this megastar, and she never really gave a glimpse into her life like that. The show was not renewed for a second season because Whitney said she would no longer be a part of it, and Bobby and Bravo couldn't come to an agreement. And thank the stars for that one. And while we're on the subject of reality shows and Bobby Christina, I'm just gonna jump ahead a little bit here, but I need to mention it because it pisses me off so much, and I don't really know another place in the timeline where it will fit. I was not aware that there was a reality show immediately after Whitney Houston died. It was called The Houstons on Our Own, and I believe it was spearheaded by Pat Houston, who is or was Gary Garland Houston's wife, Gary being Whitney's brother. And in addition to being Whitney's sister-in-law, I do believe she was her personal assistant as well. I actually watched Pat in a documentary, and I really liked her. I thought that she seemed like one of the more level-headed, normal members of the Houston family. No, snakes. All of them. I'm speaking from purely emotion, no facts. I don't know these people, but this reality show was fucking disgusting.
I'm gonna do this, but, you know, I don't want to do it.
I know, and that's consistency, and I love that about you.
You know, I don't know. We'll figure it out soon. We'll figure it out.
If you need help, talk to me. All right?
Yes, ma'am. There she is. It's not easy looking down at that ground and knowing that that woman that gave birth to you, that you spent, you know, the past 18 years of your life with, is gone. No more pain, no more bullshit to me in my eyes, no matter what she did. She was my mother, and that's all she was. God, it was the way she talks, the way she walks, the way she smells. I can't push myself to leave her. God, I don't know how it happened, but it happened. This is the hardest thing I'll ever have to encounter, ever, in my life.
Bobby Christina lost her mother when she was, 17, 18 years old? Very, very young. And those 17, 18 years were very traumatic. She already had a fucked up life before losing her mother. Yes, of course, she had wealth and tons of opportunities that many children do not have. But I bet that little girl would have traded all of that for a semi-normal private life with healthy parents. So Bobby Christina's 17, 18 years old, very, very young. I still think 17, 18 is a child, basically. She just lost her mother. She's had this traumatic life. All of you failed Bobby Christina. There's no reason for this show except monetary gain and exploitation. And you know what? I'm going to blame any person in her family involved in any capacity in that reality show. They really thought, hey, you know what would be really great right now? A reality show, because that went so well before. Let's just keep milking Whitney so she can't even rest in peace. And let's exploit her young child, who is very obviously on drugs throughout this entire show. She is not grieving her mother in a healthy way at all. And none of them thought, this is a really bad idea, let's not do this. No, let's just keep milking these people for money. There were moments where she was slurring so much that she couldn't speak. You couldn't comprehend anything coming out of her mouth. But no, keep exploiting the girl that's clearly going through addiction and loss and is clearly down a really dark path like her mother. Let's just exploit her. Let's just keep the cycle going. So disgusting. I don't trust any of them. There was one sort of eerie thing people kept repeating. Multiple people from multiple different sources saying the same thing. Bobby Christina, that poor girl, she never had a chance. Those greedy fucking goblins mooched off of Whitney and probably still are and will continue to do so until there's nothing left to mooch. And not just Whitney, I'm sure they're mooching off of Bobby Christina as well. I know that could come off as extremely disrespectful to the Houston family. I don't care. What you did to that little girl, wrong on so many fucking levels. Obviously, in hindsight, it's even worse now that we know that unfortunately Bobby Christina passed away at a very young age. But anyone involved in that reality show in any capacity only thought of themselves, only thought of monetary gain, thought nothing about getting that little girl help. And that's very sad. Jumping back to the aftermath of being Bobby Brown, Whitney continued on with her career despite this huge blemish. She performed at the 2006 Turin Winter Olympics. This was not Whitney's best performance. Her voice sounded broken and fragile. A lot of major Whitney fans said this was incredibly painful to watch. Not because just vocally she wasn't at her best. It's because you can hear the pain in her voice when she sings. It was really bad, but Whitney, ever the fighter, continued on and tried to find light in this really dark time.
Singer Whitney Houston, one of the greatest voices of our generation. CNN has gotten confirmation from our representative, has died.
We have breaking news tonight out of Los Angeles, the death of singing star Whitney Houston at the age of 48.
The world far beyond Hollywood is mourning the loss of Whitney Houston's enormous talent.
She goes, "Mommy, do you know why I'm here?" I said, "Well, tell me why." She says, "To take care of that beautiful face of yours."
Bobby, 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 my baby, my little girl. I was not built to break. I didn't know my own strength. There were so many times I wondered how I get through the night. I thought I took all that I could take. Didn't know my own strength, and I crashed down and I tumbled, but I did not crumble. I got through all the pain. Oh,
Music and love are the same things, really, you know. So, and if our kids grow up with music in their lives, then there is no question that there will always, always be love, y'all.
Faith kept me alive. I picked myself back up. I hold my head up high. I was not built to break. I didn't know my own strength. I was not built to break. No, no. I got to know